So welcome back to our second podcast about the Sculptor School. How's everybody been over the last week?
Yeah, really good.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Anything
Lovely
you want
weekend.
to report back? Or?
We walked up Glastonbury Tall.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Yeah, no. Were you like stomping up there, Andy? Yeah,
I'm going to write a book. It's not waiting to die. It's not not waiting to die. It's waiting for die. That's what I
I'm sorry, but we women, we expect this. The queens, especially in Glastonbury as well. It's kind of got goddess vibes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad you've had a really good weekend. And I'm like very relieved now because one of my daughters I've got 3 daughters, and one of my daughters has just flown safely, thankfully, from Melbourne to China and now to Thailand. Wow. And I just found out this morning she's there safely, so I can relax.
You can relax and enjoy this week now.
Children. In this episode, we're going to start off by talking about the sometimes like contentious, controversial aspect of human bodies and how they're portrayed, how people perceive their own bodies and faces, what happens when you get asked for a commission, and maybe like how you want to portray someone perhaps may differ to the way they see themselves, or all of these different things. And then we're going to talk a lot more about the Sculptor School and just see where we go. So, I was going to start off by saying that I watched a program recently and it covered the fact that Winston Churchill, towards like the latter part of his life, had a painting made of him. It was a commission, and when it was revealed, he was really unhappy with the sort of final image of him, and he really didn't like it. And I was thinking, the way people feel about their bodies and their faces is can be, incredibly sort of delicate sometimes. And so let's just sort of open up a discussion, because this applies so much to sculpture when you get commissions. Like, how much do you use artistic license? How much do you stick to the reality of what's there? And can we add the little story about Michelangelo as well? Off we go.
It's a subject that you have to be very, very sensitive about, because to me, portraiture is all about capturing the soul of the person. It's no good just getting a photographic likeness. It's got to go beyond that. And that's what makes sculptures so beautiful. But there are different levels of how you do this. So in a portrait, it has to be, as far as I'm concerned, a beautiful portrait of that person, both looking at like them, but also exuding the personality that is lost because you've just got an effigy of them.
So do you mean capturing the spirit? Andy,
it is capturing the spirit of the soul, whatever you want to call it.
And
but there's also
you're weaving in the story of their lives often into into a portrait, aren't you?
Yes, you are. But that aside, I think if we're looking at it in its purest sense, that it is a likeness of somebody, that is one aspect of this. But there are other aspects within this, where if you're doing the full body, for example, how you would deal with that. Because back in 500 BC, when suddenly the Greeks decided that they were going to make their gods in the perfect image of a human being, it's the first time that realist art really began.
Yeah.
They created a series of rules because they weren't interested in the human body massively. They were interested in gods. So they were creating this pantheon of gods that they believed in emphatically. So they had to be beautiful. They had to be the ultimate in human bodies. And they created a series of rules around that. The 8-head proportion is my guiding light. If you don't,
you explain.
Yeah, the 8-head proportion is that we are 8 heads high.
Okay.
And I, in my old studio in Buckinghamshire, for a year, I measured everybody that came into the studio to see how the 8-head proportion related to modern people, modern figures. And in that year, one person was 8 heads high. One person.
Yeah.
So you have this sense of perfection that comes from a heritage that I absolutely love.
Yeah.
All classical art comes from this.
Yeah.
And I think it's a wonderful heritage to keep alive. It also is functional. So anything that I want to create has to be functional. It has to work. It's no good having a theory that doesn't work. It has to work. So when you're looking at the human body, 2 heads stacked one on top of each other gives you the height of your knee, and that is the height of the joint of the knee. The knee cap is just above the joint.
Okay.
Then if you pile 2 more heads on, so now you've got 4 heads.
Right.
That's half of the human body because we're 8 heads tall, supposedly. That takes you to the hips, so that's your halfway point.
Right.
Then it doesn't work as a system unless you drop the heads down from the hips to the perineum. That's the bottom of the pelvis.
Okay.
That distance on a perfect human is the same as the height of the neck.
Right.
And this is a fractal aspect of the human body, in that you get these repeat designs, these repeat measurements, these repeat rhythms that run through the body. And I love fractals. They're just what make us and make the body work. So if you drop the head down to the perineum, then to your tummy button is a head. From your tummy button to your xiphoid process, that's a little spiky bit that you feel at the bottom of your sternum.
This is one of Andy's 34 muscles. Is that
It's
all?
one of
Like
the-
what?
It's part of the rules of the body. These become landmark features. And then from your sternum to your jugular notch, which is just at the top of the sternum, is another head.
Okay.
Then you rise upwards by the height of the neck, which is the same as from the hips to the pelvis to the perineum, and then there's a head on top, of course.
And
all of these things work.
We created the charts that we use at the sculpture school around this system, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
So,
but it harks back to that period.
Yeah.
But I found through my own hands-on study of how proportion works that most humans these days are 7.5 heads tall, and that makes a good natural-looking figure. So you don't change the whole body into 7.5 heads because the 8-head proportion works perfectly. All you do is put a 7.5 head on top.
And because like bodies is such a sort of controversial topic at the moment, because you've got the body positive movement, there's also panic about, health panics about people's weight and all these different things. And I feel that are sort of very much in the ether currently. So if you were to have a commission to portray a human body, well, I know like some of your previous commissions, you've had that. How do you go about sort of incorporating like different idealisms of the human body? So for example, recently, like if we go back a few decades, as we were saying earlier, like heroin chic was in fashion. So sort of based on like a lot of the like fashion catwalk models being particularly almost like emaciated. And that was very much a look. And then we've had like sort of more recently, it's been like the era of the gym bunny and like, butt lifts and things. And like a completely different sort of body image. So those are kind of like the idealized bodies. And sorry, I've been talking about female bodies more there, but I think this is relatable to men as well. But so you've got kind of like the idealized standards, but they change. But then you've got the actual human body, haven't you? All of our human bodies, which are all different, they vary and they vary over time. So when you get a commission that features a human body, where do you start?
You start with the 8-head proportion because you have to have an anchor point. So you can't just launch into any old thing. You have to know where you're coming from and where you're going to.
Okay.
So in order to be able to do that, you need an anchor point, and the anchor point is always going to be based in antiquity because I think it's a lovely heritage, really important. It's part of what made us the human race. It's part of our evolution. That happens through art. We've been sculpting and drawing and making images for at least 45,000 years. And it wasn't until 500 years before Christ that we actually started to try and represent the world as we see it. It's a huge psychological step. So all of this to me means everything as far as art is concerned. And what you're talking about in terms of trends, I think I've never been a person that's been interested in trends at all. And to me, it's about representing what you think is beautiful as an artist.
Right. Okay.
And this follows the heritage of art all the way through. Think of John Waterhouse, for example. He painted his muse all the time. It was the same woman in every painting.
Yeah.
And I really get that because that's what he thought was beautiful. He didn't have to worry about anything else. Yeah. And I know so many other artists that do their own partners or have a muse that they are utterly obsessed by. And that dictates the way that you go, because otherwise it gets incredibly complex. Now, we had to do a figure with a Kardashian bottom, for example. That's something that then I would study that and make that work in that way.
In that context.
Within the context of that. In fact, interestingly, we had some of the world's top surgeons who were experimenting with butt surgery.
We had to do a lot of research, didn't we?
A lot of research. I got banned
My
on
butt
Pinterest.
wouldn't fit in with like how it should look. Mine's a bit saggy now. 3 daughters knocking on a bit.
But it was absolutely fascinating, wasn't it?
It was
teaching
really
these,
interesting.
Reconstructive surgeons, really. What a bottom should look like.
There's a methodology
variety
to all
as well,
these
I
things.
guess,
One of the things that really struck me when I first started teaching was I thought, well, because I'm passionate about bottoms, I always have been.
Why not?
Unashamedly so. But I thought, well, we all love bottoms, surely. So when I was teaching the students, I thought, well, here's the chance to sculpt a bottom. You know what a bottom looks like. Do it. And what we really surprisingly, what I ended up with was a series of square boxes like you might get at the supermarket to put your shopping in. And I was thinking, where does a square box come into the beauty of a bottom?
They weren't peachy at all.
So no peachiness, no beauty, no curves. So I had to develop a way of teaching that would give us a structure again, because it all comes from structure, all of this. So unless you have that anchor point, that structural point, you cannot proliferate from there. You cannot expand into Kardashian bottoms or anything else, actually, because you can't do a basic bottom.
I guess, if we can just strip that back again a little bit more. So at the Sculpture School, Andy and Di teach a course which is called a crochet. And that's just a 2-day course, isn't it? But that's about the body stripped back. And we're talking about, I guess, I'm just going to talk about this just very briefly. But the idea, our muscles, all of our kind of the outer exterior of our bodies are based on our inner frameworks, aren't they? So whether it's a skeleton or the sort of bones in our face, and then we've got all sort of the outer layers. But with the crochet course, that's when you're teaching about the body sort of stripped back of the flesh, isn't it? And what it would the structure underneath. Is that correct?
It is. The crochet course is an interesting one because it's to help students learn their anatomy. So they need to have learnt their anatomy before they come on the crochet course, because otherwise it means nothing. It is about, teaching is a very different thing from learning. So a good teacher teaches the students to learn well, so that they've got have the skills to be able to put their knowledge, their academic knowledge, into gear, as I spoke briefly about in the last podcast. And that comes from structure. And those structures they're not as strict as they were in terms of classical art, where if you didn't do a little toe in the right position, you were marked down for it. That's where we needed the art revolution at the beginning of the 20th century, because the dogma that surrounded it was becoming oppressive.
Too narrow.
And I think it still does. It throttles inspiration. It throttles your ability to think outside the box, really, because you're doing a beautiful system, and that's not what I want to create. But you do need these anchor points, so that if you want to do a person that's overweight or whatever it might be, you know exactly where to start, and you know exactly what you're doing. Because certainly with somebody who is well padded like myself at the moment.
One of my friends calls it carrying lots of timber. No, I don't mean you're carrying lots of timber. She was talking about herself. She's like, I'm just carrying a bit more timber than I normally do. And I was like, I really like that phrase.
Yeah, it's a nice way of putting it. But you know that you're not dealing with muscle anymore. You're dealing with the fat pads themselves. And fat pads are part of your anatomy.
And crucial,
crucial part.
Really, don't they, Andy? When fat pads have their own anatomy and their own rhythm. And that's something sort of advanced that you
It's knowledge based.
Yeah. So I think I remember, just as an example, are these bits here fat pads, Andy? Is that correct? Is it
your arms are
like
sort
the
of
wings
lubricated by them?
Yeah, these little bits here. So when I train, lots occasionally they go and then they just come back. But Andy, because there was something about a little anecdote about Michelangelo that you were going to tell us, maybe to do with like sculpting. Like when you sculpt, like, I don't know, like an idealized like six pack,
that's right. Yeah. This came from a story that came about through an anatomist friend of mine, Peter Abrams.
Okay.
And he was doing research into the potential Michelangelo figures that were found in the attic in one of the Rothschilds' properties.
Right, okay, wow.
As you do.
Sorry, stomach.
Yeah. And he was talking about the fact that Michelangelo had done so many dissections.
Yeah.
He did so many dissections that he was seeing that some people have more muscles than others. And what he was particularly interested in was the six-pack. So the six-pack is the three groups of muscles above the navel. And then most people have another set just underneath the navel, which you can't see because we tend to have a bit of fat around there, even when you're young.
Yeah.
But now those muscles show. But he also knew that some people had another set underneath that.
Okay, wow.
So all of us have at least an 8-pack.
Okay.
That's 4 sets of muscles, one below the navel, which you rarely see. And then some people, 6% of the population, have another set of muscles underneath. And because Michelangelo knew that they were there, I think he did 56 dissections. He incorporated it into his sculptures.
Yeah.
So that and the way that he did toes was how Peter Abrams put together, was part of the team that put together the evidence that these sculptures, Rothschild sculptures, were in fact Michelangelo's work.
No, that's incredible. And that's really fascinating as well, because I guess as a sculptor, you can choose, like if you're sculpting someone's torso. And when I was in Florence recently, I went to the workshop. It's like a marble sculpting workshop of Jason Arkles, and Jason's hopefully going to appear on the podcast in season 2. But one of his students, Teddy, was sculpting a man's idealized torso with a 6-pack, not an 8-pack though, or a 10-pack, out of marble, literally out of a block of marble. And it's fascinating. But obviously that is the idealized like depiction.
It's very idealized.
And but Di, you mentioned a maquette, and just for listeners who don't know what that is, can you just explain what a maquette is?
A maquette is the small version of a sculpture when you're sort of realizing your ideas, or you've been commissioned, you've come up with the drawing, and then this is the 3D version of the drawing, and it helps your commissioner and other people to understand what it's going to look like in 3D, and it also gives the artist an opportunity to refine their design, work out the angles and how the design actually works. For example, the one that you just recently done with the Queen and Prince Philip, that's got the lines and the angles in it. It all triangulates, doesn't it? And it's really beautiful, and it creates a wonderful design in the round that you can see. So it's a small version for everybody to understand before you move on to the life size or twice life size.
And that's beautiful. And I think, just go back to Michelangelo from earlier, like again, when I was in Florence and I saw Jason, the marble sculptor, and he sculpts in other materials as well. But I went to the home of Michelangelo, and there you can see his maquettes from all those hundreds of years ago. And some of his are quite crude, actually, because he was quite renowned for not finishing things, wasn't he? So some of them are sort of quite small and almost, a bit kind of simplistic, but you got the sense of what he was trying to achieve. I think there was one of his like Statue of David later. And again, it was like a very small version. But it's like like even someone as renowned as him, you know, starts off with his practice pieces, and it was just like that. Yeah, you felt like you were really following his journey of like the beginning stages to get to like these beautiful end results.
The V&A has some beautiful maquettes in it too, doesn't it? Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. And one of the things I found really inspiring about seeing that maquette is that when I started to teach, I had to find ways of being able to express what I do in order to explain to students how it works.
Yeah.
And part of that is how you apply clay. So clay is applied in strokes that are linear.
Right, okay.
In the same way that if you were drawing, you would learn to draw a line on a piece of paper before you start to do anything else.
It's like a gestural...
It's a gestural stroke.
Thing.
Because we are very bad at seeing dots. We don't see from one point to another point. It has to be joined up for us to be able to see the image that comes from various points of measurement.
Let's talk about face, because we've talked about bodies. Let's talk about faces, and then we'll talk a bit more about sculpture school and about, you know, running it as a business and all of those kind of things. But let's talk about faces. So, as I said earlier, I've got 3 daughters, and they're very, like when they were younger, as kids are, they're very kind of like open and honest about what they see about your face that may or may not be like what other people might perceive as like attractive or normal or whatever. So one of the things I remember, like my girls saying were like, "Oh, mum, you know, like when you talk, your mouth is lopsided and you've got thin lips and all of these different things." Like, thanks, charming. But you know, so yeah, and obviously, like we've talked earlier about kind of how idealized faces are at the moment. So with quite sort of like voluptuous lips, that kind of thing. Like, you know, having like trying to think of the term for it. And I've used it on my social media. I just can't think of the word for it. Oh, it's about the jawline, a snatched jaw. So having like a very kind of defined jawline, and like all of these different like aesthetic treatments you can have to try and achieve that effect. But obviously that's kind of like, again, idealized at the moment. But like if you were carving, maybe not me, but if you were carving, you know, if you're carving someone, not carving, if you're creating someone's face, and sculpting someone's face, like how do you work with what's there, you know, what's truly there, and then maybe again thinking about the portrait of Winston Churchill earlier, and I know that's a picture rather than sculpture, but what someone hopes to see of themselves as opposed to what's there, like what element of kind of editing
if you're doing a
do you
portrait,
use?
it has to be a likeness of that person. You cannot decide that because they've got a wart in the middle of their forehead that they'd look better without that wart. Because by doing so, you insult them. They've learned to live with that wart forever. So when they look in the mirror, that's what they expect to see.
I would be really upset if someone didn't sculpt my mole or my, you know, or in a painting, because they're choosing how I look. Rather than representing me as I am. From a, you know, from a personal point of view, if I'd commissioned someone, I wouldn't like it.
We all know that, you know, like when there are paintings of the Queen, going back to paintings again, but when there are paintings of the Queen, some of them have completely caught her likeness. And then others are like, oh, it's nearly there, but there's something not quite right, something that's missing. So when you're doing a sculpture of someone's face, and I know, Andy, when I've art modelled for you, and I've listened to your talk to the students about how human faces are so similar, but there's just the slightest tiny details that make them different, like everyone's face is unique. How do you capture that pure likeness? Because if you don't get it spot on, the sculpture or painting can look absolutely nothing like the actual person, and then it's all ruined, isn't it?
Well, to me, it comes down to a system again. So you have that anchor point so that you know exactly what you're doing at any moment. You're not trying to get their likeness. And that sounds completely counterintuitive. But like the body is made up of 34 essential muscles, the face is made up of 34 essential measurements.
Okay.
And those measurements are precise.
Right.
So, for example, if you are measuring the temples, which is here, across the forehead to here, you measure to the end of the eyebrow because you know where the end of the eyebrow is. It's a point. If you're measuring to the temples, that's this area ear.
Okay.
Right up to the ear and round, of
So
which there are
big.
hundreds of measurements
Yeah.
there, all of them slightly different.
Yeah.
So you have to know where you're measuring
Right.
to.
Okay.
And then you create your clay
Yeah.
from this series. It's a sequential series of measurements that you take. That positions your armature dead center inside your clay work so that you won't bump into it. That's the most important beginning to the whole process. But then from that point onwards, each measurement has to tally with every other measurement. And you can't do that by eye. So if you practice this technique, the likeness of that person appears in front of you like magic. Bang.
Well, I was thinking as well of, so for everyone listening, like Andy's sculpture of David Bowie, like I remember putting a picture of it on my Instagram and not saying who it was. And I had, all these people commenting like, that's David Bowie. It's because the likeness, you captured the likeness like completely accurately, like everyone just knew from a glance who he was. And I think it's kind of brilliant to know that students can come to the sculpture school and again, like having not had previous experience, but being able to work up to a position where through learning the techniques that you show them, that they too can achieve that likeness in a portrait sculpture.
One of the most important things that Andy always talks about when doing portraits is the profile.
Yeah.
And you have to capture the profile first.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Because that's how we identify each other. Do you want to explain more about that?
Yeah. To me, whenever people always ask the question, well, where do you start?
Yeah, I was literally thinking that.
Well, you always start with the profile.
Okay.
There's only one exception to that, and that's the hand. It's rubbish in profile.
Right.
You do it as a full frontal
My
sculpture.
stomach's rumbling. Sorry.
And it's so in order to be able to fix that profile, and the profile is the only thing that actually is a two-dimensional line. So it runs from your hairline down the center of your forehead, your nose, your philtrum, and then down into your chin and neck. It's a fixed line. It's one line. Now, two-dimensional lines is where you have a straight line. It doesn't deviate from that line like a piece of paper. You measure from one point to another on a piece of paper. It will always be a straight line. It will always be two-dimensional. When you move into 3 dimensions, it gets really difficult. But you can make a profile board. So a profile board fits onto your sculpture and gets that profile exactly right. That fixes all your measurements as well. And I found that technique is a real game changer.
So
everything changes from that point.
So let's just think about your 4-day courses. So obviously I've art modeled for you, but I've never had a go at sculpture, which is crazy. And I will have a go at sculpture because I'm in the right place to learn. But I was just using myself as an example. So as a complete beginner, and I'm not really an artist, like I've done a little bit of sketching, but that's, it's not very good. So if I came to you as a complete beginner in terms of like art and sculpture, and I wanted to create a human face, a portrait in a sculpture, and I sign up for your 4-day course, as a complete beginner, take me through what happens on day one, how would I get to this end product, which I can be proud of.
No, it's right. Well, with our portrait course, we're very specific in that all the students have to work from one model, the same model. If you've never sculpted before, it's about learning the system, and learning how to measure, how to do the profile, why it's so important. So we on day one we have a model come in. And we show people how to take photographs for portraiture. Because Andy's found over the years that particularly if you're doing a portrait commission, you're usually working with someone who's extremely busy, hasn't got a lot of time. So you bring them in for a portrait photograph session first, so that you, the artist, can go away and work on the sculpture and then bring them in occasionally rather than having them sitting there for days on end. So we bring the portrait model in, we show them how to take photographs, and then we also show them on that model how to measure. And the measurements are really crucial, aren't they? And we've got a specific chart which lays it all out of what you have to do. And from that point on day one, it's about claying up, getting clay on the portrait armature, which we have made and created for them.
Can I just stop you there, Di? So I know we mentioned armatures a tiny bit in the first episode, but can you say to the listeners exactly what an armature is?
Over to Anna.
An armature is a structure that supports the clay work.
What's it made of?
It depends, actually.
Okay.
But if we're talking about portraits, it's made of steel.
Okay.
If you do come on one of our portrait courses, you get one of these unique portrait armatures. They are designed by me, and we manufacture them.
Okay.
They're not bog standard things.
No, and that brings us into the fact that we make the tools to go with the job because they no longer exist. So the armature is the support mechanism.
So the student, they each have their own workstations, don't they, with their armature, their clay, their tools. And sorry, Di, carry on. But I just wanted to clarify what an armature was.
Yeah, so they have this armature that's designed by Andy, and it's theirs to take home.
Right. Okay.
So they, at the end of the course, they have a clay portrait that they can take home, that they can either decide to have moulded and cast, or there's another method of preserving the clay. It's not as permanent, but there's a way of keeping it.
We don't do moulding and casting at Sculpture School, do we? But we do a short course about how to mould and cast. And also, if students have produced a clay model at Sculpture School that they want to have turned into a bronze cast, then we can arrange for the deposit and collection of their model into a bronze, because it takes place at another venue,
foundry.
Another foundry. So basically, students can have a bronze made through the Sculpture School.
It's bronze or resin bronze.
Or resin bronze.
Yeah.
Okay. So Di, sorry,
back to day one.
Back to day one.
On day one, once they start claying up, it's about applying clay to the armature, and then it's finding the measurements in space. And the first things that you start on are the profile measurements, aren't they? So, the major features: where is the eyebrow? Where is the end of the nose? Where is the mouth? And Andy guides everybody through step by step. So if you've not done it before, and it can be really daunting, you've got a system to work through, and you've got Andy's guidance, and usually an assistant as well, coming round and giving you some hands-on teaching, so you're not left wallowing in a mire of clay.
We keep the classes small so we get this element of one-to-one teaching, which is really important. But one thing I would like to interject with is that the whole thing is set up as a game, so it's fun. I'm a professional sculptor, so when I'm in these situations, it's full on. If you don't get the portrait to look like that person, or you're upsetting them, it's a disaster financially and everything else. So it has to be done professionally. So we pretend that we have a very wealthy client. Wealthy client is the guy that's come in to sit for us, or the woman that's come in to sit for us. And we go through this process of learning how to take photographs, learning about light, learning about how the photograph should be taken. They're very specific. In order for them to be a good tool for you to be able to go away and make the sculpture. Because in my career, because I've molded and cast so many pieces to so many artists, so many sculptors, I've got to know them really well. And I have seen some absolute disasters occurring through portraiture. Because they want to have the client sitting for them, as he would have done at the beginning of the 20th century. These days we have photography. And it is very boring and very tedious and actually annoying to have to go and sit for an artist day after day after day. You have to be a good friend to do that. And the poor Duke of Wellington had to sit for 56 portraits in his life.
Poor guy.
56, and there's no photography there.
No.
So they were like the paparazzi. They were insistent. Rodin was the same, but Rodin was the first sculptor that we know of that saw the benefit of photography, that you could take photographs and work from that and not annoy your client to the point where they want to thump you.
Ray Dan is a really interesting example as well, because I've just a few days ago on my Instagram, I posted a picture of his thinker statue, because I just think, or sculpture, I just think it's like such a beautiful image, isn't it, of a man sort of deep in thought. And before I sort of move on, is there anything else you wanted to say, Di, about the 4-day course and like learn the portrait course, and for anyone that wants to sign up and have a go at creating a human face? Or
it's a fun course to do. It's really lovely in that you learn so much about the human face, and lots of facts that you never knew existed. And Andy's very good, as he's a very good raconteur. So you learn so many things outside of portraits, but it's a really fantastic thing to come in at the beginning, have nothing, and to go home with a human head that is looking like a human. You often see travesties that people have created at say evening classes or whatever, where they've not had real instruction, whereas our system works.
No, that's brilliant. Andy, could you just give us, from following on from what Di said, could you just give us like a little facial fact about something to do with the face that is kind of, I don't know, like something that blew your mind away?
The problem with the human face is, and you get this with hands and feet, is that anatomy doesn't help, because knowing where the muscles are, can't see the muscles anyway. So that's not pertinent to the process. The human face is exactly like that. I mean, what are these lines here? Your cheek lines have nothing to do with muscles at all. They're to do with the 8 fat pads that we have covering our face. So that's what creates the shapes that you see. So conventional anatomy, muscle and bone, doesn't work.
Right.
So the best system, I think, for the human face is rules of thumb, which are generally true. And a really nice example of that is that if you take a measurement from the forehead to the back of the head here, halfway, that will be there. I know it's there because it will cut just in front of your ear and highlight the apex of your jaw here. Your ear sits just behind that halfway line, and it slopes backwards like that. So 90% of ears lean backwards slightly.
I didn't know that.
And 10% of ears are bolt upright. So what that tells you is that it increases your observation skills. So when you're looking at an ear, you don't see an ear like everybody else would do. You see the position.
I feel paranoid now about my face and my ears. I was going to hide them.
It's just like little rules. It's not whether you're good looking or bad looking or any other factor. It's just these are lovely little rules. And rules of thumb increase your observation skills.
Do you find like friends of yours get slightly nervous at how you're perceiving them?
I was just going to say it's really funny because Andy was explaining this rule to some friends of ours, and when she went, she said, "Oh, I'm going to go and have a look at mine." And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, mine are upright. She said, I'm in the 10%." And she was just so excited that she was different.
Well, it's just you don't really think about, like, obviously, as we were saying earlier, that you're taught about certain things that are in trend or whatever, or you'll become more aware of or something, or because your children point them out to you. But there are lots of things that we don't notice about ourselves that make us unique and make us individual. And I think by sculpting the human body and the human face, you sort of look out for the beauty in individual faces, don't you?
We're terrible at people watching, aren't we? But it's not in the normal.
It's not spiteful.
Normal sense of the word. If we're out and we're having dinner or something, and we'll say, "Wow, look at that person's trapezius! Isn't that amazing?" Or when we were in the car and that person was walking past us.
It was a lady walking her dog, and it was summertime. We were stuck in a traffic jam. And both of us turned to the other and both said, "Wow, look at her tibialis anterior." And the tibialis anterior
You sculpture nerds. I like that with history. I like that with sculpture. It's not weird perving. It's just like looking at the muscles. No, that's so cool.
How exciting it all is. You'll see the world again like a child. because you're seeing things that you never see.
And also like appreciation for the human body and like
Yes,
all
absolutely.
the different elements of the human body, from the skin, the muscles, everything. And like the rules. And I want to come back to the rules, maybe if we get time today or in the next episode, like, the golden meme and things, because I find those things so fascinating, and the curves. But if we talk about, so we've talked about a 4-day course. So for anyone who's listening to this and would love to have a go at sculpture, whether that's like sculpting human body or sculpting the face, or again, like with an animal, we run the same courses for sort of animal bodies, animal faces. So whatever takes your fancy, like sign up for a 4-day course. You don't need to have had any experience previously.
No.
And it's just, and I've been in sculpture school when you're running these courses. I've met different students. They come from all different backgrounds, don't they? They're all ages. Some have been going through a traumatic time, like maybe just got divorced or something. Some are like very busy professionals, and they've just like rushed to take 4 days off to come down and do the course. It doesn't matter what stage of life you're at. These courses are suitable for anybody. And they're just such a lovely experience. And the teaching, because you both make everyone feel so at home. And if anyone's worried about mathematical proportions and, I'm never going to be able to do this, you don't need to worry about that, because Andy and Di, you're both such... But you make everyone feel so welcome, and people ask a million questions and you don't get flustered or exasperated or anything. You're so patient. So, just come and have a go. But let's talk a little bit more about, so in the first episode, we talked about when you met and you got together and started the sculpture school, and Andy, you'd been previously you'd been an apprentice at a casting workshop, hadn't you? And also you were a massage therapist. You had a young family at the time to support. And Di, you came from, an art background, but then you went into nursing. You also had a young family. And then your worlds collide and you start the sculpture school. How have you been able to run it as a business? How have you found commissions? How did you get started teaching? Should we cover that for a little bit?
I think the world of making money in art is really hard, unless you get chosen by one of the Saatchis, or you have an incredibly lucky break and manage to get a sculpture into London within your first few years of your career. It's an uphill struggle.
Okay.
That's why we started the sculpture school, and we have other elements now. We create sculpture tools and all of that side of it, because they simply don't exist anymore. And my passion, really, as the years have gone by, is really about the teaching side of things. I feel this sense that of luck, of being incredibly fortunate, and I want to pass that on before I die. I always think of the story of Stradivarius. So the story of Stradivarius, he had his secret lacquer that he put onto the violins.
Right, I didn't know this.
Resonate in a unique way that makes his violins so valuable. And he died with the secret of his,
so no one else.
His lacquer. He never passed it on. And to me, it's about making sure that knowledge is passed on generation to generation. Because otherwise we slide backwards into naivety all the time. I'm a bit of a history buff. I really enjoy reading history. And I'm always fascinated with the collapse of realist art. In about 300 AD it began, and by 400 AD we gone from beautiful, lifelike portraits of the emperors like Caracalla. There's a fantastic portrait of Caracalla. And then you get Constantine 100 years later. It's not human. It's a naive spaceman's sort of idea of how a human being would look if they just popped down here, had a quick look, and shot back up and had a quick go with some clay. Art very quickly over 100-year period degenerated into naive art. From this high art, with all this depth of knowledge that we've just been discussing about. And it's that's so fascinating. Why would you want to get rid of it? It's endlessly fascinating. It never stops.
And then there was the Renaissance, which was amazing.
Well, for 1,000 years, we forgot all of the rules and the ability to be able to create realist art. to be reborn in the Renaissance. And now we're going through the same process of losing it if we're not careful. And there are other influences coming in, like AI, AR, and all the other new computer-led, very clever stuff that is taking away talent from the individual, so that you can only create this fantastic art if you have a computer, if you have all the machinery that goes with it.
Because there is that beauty of creating, like as we discussed in the first episode, creating something tangible with your hands, isn't that? And there's nothing like human nuance. So yeah, of course, like I've got like former students who work in like AI businesses, like in Silicon Valley and things. And that's an incredible sector. And it's not going anywhere, is it? That's very much a part of modern life. But I feel as passionately as you do, and I feel this from like a writing perspective, from like a history perspective, all kinds of different ways, that the human individualism and human nuance, like each person has their own special skills, and you can have AI and things, but at the end of the day we still all have our uniqueness that we can bring to something creative. And so it's so important that human beings are still at the helm of making sculpture and making art, and it's our hands, our physical hands, not hands on a computer.
It's about creativity is so good for the soul.
Yeah.
And if we don't express ourselves creatively, then we're losing. So many important things.
It's in our DNA. We've been doing it for 45,000 years. As a species, we've been around for just over 100,000. That's all. We're a microsecond at the end of evolution. And this is unique. It's never happened before. And it's so important. It's one of the most valuable things that humans do. And I think that being able to make it fantastic, to make it this exciting process that you can go through is something I really, really passionately want to share. More important than doing big commissions in cities and so on.
What's really incredible as well is because you've diversified. So you teach. You you respond to commissions, you run the school, you've been able to make a living out of sculpture. And again, I want this to be like encouraging for people who are creative out there to know that you may be told like you need to be a solicitor, or you need to be this, you need to be that. But, if you're really determined and you really love something enough, then do come and do a sculpture course. Like, don't think, if I can't make a living out of it, how am I going to do it? Because you can, because as we said earlier, where there's a will, there's a way. And if you really love, sculpting or painting or whatever it is creatively that you do, there will be a way to make it work for you. And like, as you've both done, you've created the sculpture school, you teach, and that passes on these incredible skills to other generations. You also take commissions, and then in your own private time you sometimes sculpt too, don't you? And sculpt what you actually want to sculpt. And dye you paint. So it's just like, have that passion but make it happen.
We do help people do that because it is about not getting a qualification. What's the point of a qualification? You'll get the qualification, then you can't make a living doing it. So you go off and push trolleys at the Tesco's. And that's what happens to a lot of the students. They never get anywhere. They never get a chance to get a foot in the door. We teach you how to earn a living, how to do the whole process. Whether or not you go on to do it is entirely down to you. That's down to tenacity and a will, iron will
to succeed,
to create what you want to create and to succeed. I know endless students who are incredibly talented. But we've just lost one recently who just can't be bothered at the end of the day, and so that will kill your ability to be able to carry on.
The flip side of that, I was just thinking, sculptors like Lucy, who trained with you on the 1-year program, didn't she?
I was just going to mention the 1-year program. It is one of the other things that we do is that we have an extended course, a 1-year program, where students can attend every single workshop that we run. Plus they are given assignments in between and tests so that we can make sure that they're learning their anatomy, and so that they finish the sculptures that they've been working on. But it's really lovely for us now to see several years down the line that they are becoming professional sculptors in their own right. So, for example, you mentioned Lucy. She's now, she's got her, her theme. She loves animals, and she's specialising in sculpting those, and she's exhibiting and she's selling. And it's just wonderful to see that progression, isn't it? And we've had several other students from years back, when we first started. Helena, who studied with us, she's been running her own business now for 10 years or more.
No, that's incredible.
She works as she works in the film industry a lot, doesn't she? Plus, she's specialised in splitting image.
Oh, no, right.
So she's the only person that can repair and renew the original spitting image puppets.
No, that's amazing.
What I love about this whole thing is, I mean, I love the fact that we have had a hand in helping them with their careers.
Yeah.
But Helena, for example, if I work with her, and I have worked with her in the past, she has to teach me what she does.
Yeah.
Because she's become so specialised.
So she's got these other skills.
Yeah. She does.
It's that whole concept. I know when I used to teach history in schools, and we used to teach about from a history of science and medicine perspective, and you've got these new discoveries. And we talked about standing on the shoulders of giants. Yeah. And it's that whole idea, isn't it, that you have knowledge, you pass that knowledge on to someone else, but then equally you're given other people's knowledge. And, so you just kind of keep on building this amazing skill set. And then by having the sculpture school, you can pass on that skill set. So I was thinking of, Lucy's just exhibited at Rosemore, hasn't she? The RHS Garden, which is...
and she's at the Cotswold Sculpture Park.
Yeah, it's incredible. And then, so when I was in Florence in November last year, I went to see Louis, who was an alumni.
Yes.
Louis is in his 20s, and he did the 1-year course with you, didn't he? And he's now sculpting in Florence, and he's sculpting with the Florence Academy of Art, and he created his portfolio of sculptures at the sculpture school with you, which has enabled him to go to the Florence Academy of Art, where he's under the directorship of my friend Tom Richards. He's an incredible oil painter and is hopefully again going to come on series 2 of our podcast. But yeah, Lou's having this exciting journey out in Florence, and that began with the sculpture school because he couldn't find anywhere at the time that would give him the sculpture tuition that he needed. And he just said that you kind of gave him everything he needed to get started in his sculpture journey.
Which is great.
So, so that you are the jewel, the jewel in the sculpture crown. So can you tell me a little bit more about so I don't know, some really standout moments for you so far in running the sculpture school, or in commissions that you've had, or...
Well, talking about students, actually, it just makes me think of a student that came to work with me when I was in my old studio in Buckinghamshire.
Okay.
And how he went on to create his own business within the film industry itself.
Wow.
And the standout moment I was thinking of was him asking me to go and work with him in Berlin.
Oh, incredible.
Wow. Which was a huge privilege for me. I've always held Pete in incredibly high esteem. And he's such a highly talented young man with so many different skills in animatronics and so on that really made him stand out in the film industry as a one-man band.
Wow.
But I went out there to sculpt a European or a German rap star called Sido.
Oh, cool. I love this.
It's one of those situations where you've got to be careful what you wish for, because I was thinking I really must do somebody really famous so that I can get my name out there. And I got what I wished. I got this guy who is incredibly famous in Europe. Nobody's heard of him here. And so I was waiting for this guy to arrive in this massive studio complex.
Sweep up in a limo or something?
Which he did.
I want that life.
They allowed me to do my bit first. So there I was in Berlin waiting for this guy to arrive. And didn't know anything about Sido. So this really nice guy with a beard turned up. And they allowed me to do my measurements and photographs first so I could go and get on with this sculpture. I had to make a sculpture of him. And I was talking to one of the technicians whilst I was there, and he was going to do a body cast of his face.
Right.
And I was thinking, why are you going to do that? I'm going to sculpt him.
Yeah.
So they wanted this cast.
Right, okay.
And I said, well, how are you going to do that? He's got a massive beard. That's one of his things.
Yeah.
He's got this great big beard. And he said, oh, it'll come off. It doesn't stick to hair. It's amazing stuff. And I was thinking, I don't think that's going to work, because mechanically, because of the way that beard hair goes, it's going to lock the silicone in position. But I was out of my element. And you can't go around telling people what to do.
Yeah.
So I just thought, oh, well, I'm sure it'll be fine. Anyway, the following day, we heard what happened, and they put silicone all over his face. And, of course, when it came to taking it off, there was no chance of getting it off. It had bled into his beard. And the whole thing had become this solid mat of silicone and beard hair.
So what?
And so they had to get some shears and cut his beard off
Oh, no.
to get him out of the mould.
Oh, my God.
And his beard was his trademark thing.
He wasn't best pleased, apparently.
Apparently, he absolutely went ballistic, which I totally understand.
That reminds me of the
actually.
story, is it the Bible story of Samson? Is it Samson and Goliath? And he has his long hair. And like all your strength is in your... My dad used to have like a massive ginger beard. And I remember when he went through a phase and then he like shaved it all off, and it was like, oh, like you're half the man you used to be without your beard. It does like give some kind of like, I don't know, like a different way of viewing someone, doesn't it?
At least they was appearing on a TV program.
Oh, no.
So he
poor guy.
wasn't very happy.
No, but that just shows the incredible experiences that you've had because of your sculpture background. But I guess we're probably coming near to the end of our episode. But Andy, could you just quickly tell us about your sculpture here behind?
This sculpture is to do with trying to break into selling stuff through galleries. Really.
Yeah.
I'm not a gallery artist.
Yeah.
And it is interesting how these specializations form a sort of lifestyle. I really love doing contract work.
Yeah.
Because I love realizing other people's dreams. But this is part of a series called Their Lives in Our Hands, which is about the African Big Five, which the Big Five were the most hunted animals during the last 19th and 20th centuries. And I wanted to create them in a way that was loving rather than ferocious. So this is a lion family, done as portraits, really, with the male licking the female's head, her eyes closing, with the power of his tongue sort of moving her skin on her head. And she's cradling her cub. So it's a lion family held in a human hand. Because it is down to us now. We're taking away the very lands that they need to live on. And so I feel quite strongly about these, and I want to finish this particular series of sculptures.
You've done three so far,
I've done
haven't you?
elephants, rhinos, and lions.
So, and that's lovely as well, because that sort of brings us to a nice conclusion about how important sculpture is in terms of messages and stories, because that kind of brings us to thinking about environment and like the protection of species and things and the climate and all of those things that are so important for today. So it's not just about us as human beings, but it's about the impact sculpture can have and the messages we tell about our environment and our animal kingdom too. So thank you both so much, and I'm looking forward to our next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. It's been great.